afternoon, John.
Hi, Marty.
John Donovan and Oceanside, Marty Keller here in Sacramento. Continuing our conversation, our exploration of accountability practice, the value, the principles, the good, the bad, the ugly, as it may be. When we left off last week, one of the things, some of you might be new watching this for the first time, we started last week our first podcast of 2021, actually recorded on New Year's Day, doing a little bit of review of the whole accountability practice. And as John pointed out, we do this regularly, but every time we do it, we've learned something new. We are also different. And so there's new insights, new information, new experience that we can bring to the conversation. And we left off last week, John, as you may recall, promising to talk a little bit today about the value of accountability practice in relationship. Mm-hmm. And last night in our Rusty Nail Club meeting here on Zoom, we started walking through the workbook that you've put together, the Intentional Living Workbook. And as you recall, you start out with the whole question of what do I want? And so much of our challenge in relationship is that we want the other person to be something, to behave a certain way, to offer certain gifts. And we get frustrated if those things are not delivered according to our expectation. Yeah. And thought maybe we might just start there to talk about the value of accountability as we work through relationship.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to do that.
All right.
And I'd like to start off by setting some parameters. One of the sessions in my workbook is the 4 constants of relationship.
Okay.
And my concept behind that is that everything we do is in relationship to something, somebody, ourselves, or somebody else, people, places, and things, situations. So accountability in relationships is a broad stroke, and we can, narrow it down to significant relationship or parental relationships or familial relationships.
If I could just underscore with before you continue that, my experience in this work, and I'm happy to share personal experiences with you as we go through this, is that it's the intimate relationships that require me to do the most work on myself.
Yeah.
Because, and maybe you're going to get to this, there's something about the loved one, whether it's a parent, a child, a spouse, a close friend, that we give permission to mirror to us things about ourselves that we may not notice in more casual relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the other thing I'd like to straighten out before we start is the word accountability. And again, for new people, if you look it up in the dictionary, it speaks to somebody being blameworthy or held accountable, which means punished. And the accountability that I'm talking about and the process I'm talking about is accountability is simply the ability to state what's happening in the moment, what you see, hear, touch, taste, feel, and stating not only what you see or hear, but the behavior that you exhibit in whatever situation you find yourself. So if somebody asks me a question and I come back with a aggressive response or a dismissive response, the accountability I'm talking about is me being accountable for the dismissive behavior or the aggressive behavior, naming the behavior and not having any blame or judgment. it's like a count, like a spreadsheet for an accountant. The red line, black line. It's just stating what's there without blame or judgment.
So are you saying if we had such an English word, it could also be rendered as stateability or nameability?
Yeah, it would have to be something other than what people are used to.
Right.
And I use this word at first in the group setting in an institution, in a jail. And when I said, what's your accountability in that? They would go right to, I'm already serving my accountability. I'm already being punished. I don't want any more punishment, which
Right.
is in alignment with how we see that word.
Sure. That's how I first heard it.
Yeah. That if I say the truth about what just happened, I'm the one that's going to be wrong. I'm the one that's going to take the fall. I'm the one that's going to get punished. And that's not what this word means in the context of living intentionally or intentional living. So it's my ability to simply say I was dismissive and then feel that instead of judge or blame that. There's a feeling to the truth about any behavior, whether we classify it as negative or positive, good or bad. The statement of the feeling, the truth, what you see, hear, touch, taste, feel, creates a connection to self. When I say, I dismissed you, but it's because you dismissed me first, then I lose the opportunity to feel the impact of my behavior, not only on myself, but then I have access to what they might be feeling. And that feeling, it's like, I didn't stop hurting people until I actually felt what it felt like to be hurt. I was so estranged from my body, even physical pain, hit my finger with a hammer. It wasn't hurt, it was stupid. I mean, the first place my mind went was, that was a dumbass move, instead of going, ouch. I mean, that seems simple. Now, if I stub my toe or run my finger into something, the first word out of my mouth is, ouch, that hurt. And recognizing the pain, because in the recognition of the pain, I'm paying attention to myself, and I can move to resolution. I can go get the ice bucket. I can put a Band-Aid. I can attend to the ouch. Before, it was like I was beating myself up. What a dumbass move. I was screaming and yelling. I was throwing stuff. And the pain actually increased because I wasn't paying attention to it. So
I have the same experience. I still have that experience. I'm accountable for the fact that I still have that experience.
okay. So in the accountability, out of the blame and judgment, I separate myself, my essence of who I am, from the behavior. So if I'm talking to a group of men and they're telling me about their partner, and they don't use that word, they use old lady, woman, whatever word, colloquial word they use. She did this and I hit her, or I yelled at her. And it's couched in a way that I lose the opportunity to see what's really happening. It becomes a story in my head instead of an actual happening. So me stating, I dismissed you, when you asked me the question, I raised my eyebrows and I dismissed you. It was what I chose to do. And I'm practicing being attentive and being nonviolent. That puts me in the room with her. And I'm not saying this is easy. When I first started this process, it was the most difficult thing I thought I ever had to do, was be accountable and just stating what happened. I dismissed you, I ignored you, I demeaned you, I just called you a name.
I hurt you.
You what?
I hurt you.
I hurt you, yes. because that meant that everything I believed about myself was now true in solid concrete, and I was stuck. I'm a goner. I just admitted I'm bad. Now I'm outed. Now everybody's going to know, and I'm just going to be worthless, whatever was going through my mind. And what I found was that was actually what I was looking for, which is a real connection to myself first, and then to the person I was standing in front of. I remember the first intimate thing I said to a woman, and this is an example of accountability. And I looked at her and I said, I do not know how to do long-term relationships. I don't know how to do them. And the response from her was coming closer to me. It was like, whoa, wait a minute. I just told you I don't know how to do relationships, which means I'm a dumbass. But it was the first real thing I ever said to her about what was going on inside me. And it blew my mind. It's like, wow, what just happened? And what happened is I opened up for her to come close by simply stating the truth of where I found myself, not being the hero, not being the guy that fixed everything, not being the guy on top of everything, not being the guy that knew. I didn't know. I was clueless, and it created a connection, and it just blew my mind. So accountability in personal relationships, intimate relationships, is the ability to connect. That's the end result, the ability to connect, which is completely counterintuitive and goes against everything I was taught about what relationships were. Well, there you have it.
Okay, well, we can end early today.
Yeah. It's like, wow. So
there's something about, let me just refer to that example. I don't know the woman that you were speaking to, nor do I need to, I think.
Right.
But there's something, I mentioned this earlier, somehow we endow those special people with an energy that builds the resistance. I have the same experience. And I think one of the things that we fear, that you may have feared, I just want to check in with you whether this was ultimately part of your challenge, to be able to find the courage to speak up and the resistance against speaking up and just being accountable, is the fear that if we tell this truth, I don't know this, or I hurt you, that the other person is going to hear that judgment about ourselves and is going to leave us.
Yeah.
And somehow we've made this person's connection with this person so important that we will actually start risk lying, hurting, and denying our behavior under the false assumption that that's going to keep our connection.
Okay. Yeah. So what I've discovered happens in a significant relationship. It's the relationship that mirrors the childhood relationship. If I am in a relationship where I'm contemplating being in a family, well, all the dysfunction from my family of origin is like, that family or this love means this is what's going to happen, because that's all I know. And I'm saying that like I knew that in the beginning. I didn't know that in the beginning. So when I get, yes, I will marry you, this whole plethora of things started happening that I was like, what's going on? Well, my body remembers family partnership as the man's drunk, the woman's working her ass off, can't get by, got 4 kids, and everybody's screaming and yelling at each other, nobody's getting any attention. So that subconscious energy comes up into to help me maintain this relationship that I just said I wanted to get in. So it's bringing up all the old experience so that I survive, and it actually recreates the old experience because I survived it. That's what my body does for me. It remembers the trauma. So if anything similar comes along, I am equipped to move through the trauma into survival. Well, everything comes up. I say, I do. And then this whole theater of triggers are now accessible to me, and I don't know it. It's like,
And they're not just accessible as a passive, just there. They're actually active.
right.
They're actually activating themselves to protect you.
Yes. Their charge is to keep me safe. So I start acting as I did in my family of origin, or I start acting like I thought my father was, or I start being defensive about how I thought my mother was, and I get into this role playing, posturing subconsciously, and then I got to explain it in real time rationally, and there is no explanation that's rational other than there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with her, and it has to be one or the other. It can't be that we're both being just activated a whole, I want to use the word theater of experiences that we're now on guard and have no idea that we are.
I was going to say that the relationship challenge is complicated by the fact that it's generally two people acting out of this family of origin safety position.
Yes.
And neither person being not, first of all, I'm not aware of it in myself, so I'm certainly not going to be aware of it in my partner.
Correct.
So everything I hear my partner say, I'm going to filter through this family of origin, keep me safe filter.
Yes.
And this person could be saying, I love you.
Yes.
And I might hear that as, oh, I got to behave a certain way, or I'm expected to do this, or rather than, oh, thank you.
Yeah. 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 Eckhart Tolle talks about this dysfunctional part of ourselves, and he calls it the pain body. So the pain body that I'm referring to now is equivalent to the traumatized inner child. So he says, when you're in a relationship, you think two people are there. And what's really going on is there's you, her, your pain body, inner child trauma, and her pain body, inner child trauma. And you're having a four-way conversation and you don't know it. You have no idea that's going on.
But I tell you what, I may have no intellectual or mental idea that that's going on, but my body certainly feels there's some kind of war going on here.
Yes.
And there's a war going on. There's a war going on whose battle lines I cannot see.
Right.
And so that tends to just feed that frustration and sense to feed back into the defense mechanism and keep it charged.
Yes.
Because there's something wrong with me now. Not only is there something wrong with her or him, now there's something wrong with me even more.
Even more.
And there was at the beginning of this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And it spirals.
Mm-hmm. There's a part of the ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, 14 traits, and it's, I think it's trait 8. No, it's trait 8. And it says addicted to excitement. When Tony A first wrote that, he put addicted to fear. And he changed it because he thought people wouldn't want to recognize their fear or talk about their fear. So he changed it to addicted to excitement. And that addiction is to the chaos, the dysfunction that was in your family of origin. We actually recreate it in our adult life with another adult. And it's in alignment with our experience as children. And we survived our childhood. So this mechanism, survival mechanism, reticular activating system, is charged with our survival, so it recreates what we can survive, which is all the dysfunction, the accusations, the suspicions, the jealousy, the not trusting, the lying. For me, it was like I would lie, and it's like, why am I lying? Why did I just say that? Why don't I just say the truth? Because the truth wasn't that bad. It was just I lied, and it becomes untenable.
Yeah, I had an insight and I just lost it, so I'm going to get it back.
So the accountability process, Marty, puts me into real time. It's the being accountable, and it's like accountable, me telling the truth, I just dismissed you, or I'm arrogant, or I'm mean. I just did something mean to you, with no blame or judgment. Just stating the behavior that is an end result of family of origin trauma. It's in alignment. It's in alignment with my lying, my arrogance is in alignment with what happened to me as a child. That's what kept me safe. That was the behavior that I survived by adopting. So if I say the truth, I'm arrogant. It aligns with that trauma and validates my inner self, that trauma, which opens up the reticular activating system just for a moment and gives me a lucid moment to go, this sucks. I want to be kind. It is my intent to be kind. Once I learned that that sequence was there, because I would notice like, damn, that was mean. I'm never going to do that again. And then 2 seconds later, I would do it again. So the accountability process breaks that cycle. It says, I'm mean, and I can feel, so I'm connected to my emotional body. I realize and feel the impact of that meanness, albeit in alignment with my experience. It hurts. And then I say, it is my intent to be kind, or it is my intent to listen, or it is my intent to nurture the relationship. It is my intent to cooperate. It is my, to all the things I want to do, and yet find I cannot do. So stringing those together, accountability, no blame, no judgment, I'm arrogant, taking the breath, connecting to my emotional body, feeling, because the body knows how to feel, it will bring up the vibration of the whatever trauma happened, 2, 3, 6, 8. And I don't have to define it or recognize it or be able to speak about it. The frequency is enough to bring relief, validation to me. And then I intend to be kind, again, fuses with that frequency of truth, of realization, of relief, and simply goes back down into my subconscious, changing that pool or reframing my total experience, which gives me more options in the moment. I am an accountability freak. I am 32 years sober. I've been doing this accountability for 20 years. And when I find myself in a dismissive place where I was dismissive or demeaning or whatever, stop, I'm going to be accountable. That was my choice to do that, knowing that it was in alignment with a trauma that hasn't been touched or released or recognized, and then say, it is my intent to be kind. So the process of me recognizing and having the ability to account for my behaviors without blame or judgment, and then feeling that and stating my intent, is a healing process. It changes the filter. So now I don't filter through the same filter. I see it a different way. And I incrementally grow and mature in this process, which I wasn't able to do as a child. I didn't have the foundation of knowing self, feeling good about self, relying on my own feeling, learning to self-regulate, learning impulse control in a safe, nurturing environment. Now I can learn those things as an adult by giving myself, reparenting myself, what my parents were unable to give me.
So I remembered what it is I wanted to say, and you actually referred to it in what you just shared. So I want to ask if you'd be willing to help us appreciate that all of this childhood trauma, at least the initial round of this childhood trauma, occurs almost strictly in an emotional body.
Yes.
That part of the challenge that we have, even in explaining this sometimes, is that we have to use words, and words necessarily go to our mental faculties. But the healing can only occur in the emotional body.
Yes.
And so this is why this is sometimes tough, particularly when we're new, although it took me years, frankly, to really gather the insights that made me trust my body.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I knew intuitively when I first started this work that this was correct. I just didn't know how to access my feelings. We've talked about that before, and we can talk about that again. But I think it's powerful and useful to help us have an appreciation of the power, the beauty, and the tenacity of this emotional body. And that part of its tenacity is that it is inaccessible to thought. And therefore, something else has to help relax the defenses.
Yes.
And that, again, you started to say that in how accountability does that by accessing the truth of the emotional body.
Yes.
In my words, now I'm going to use my words, John, you may say it differently. My experience is that when the emotional body is allowed to express itself fully, and for that expression to be witnessed by me, by the adult me, like the parent, that the body relaxes into this truth and has a recognition, and it might be the very first time in 50 years that the body could relax with the truth being stated.
Yes.
It's not necessarily logical.
No.
And it's one of those things, you and I have done this in group work where either ourselves doing the process or working with someone else, we can feel that body shift. It's a palpable shift, and it's emotional, and it's resonating through the body, which is where the emotional body also lives,
right,
in the physical body.
Yeah. The therapeutic community struggle with this. It's starting to see that the trauma is done in the emotional body, and then we perceive and then make stories about it in our head. That to heal a past trauma, necessarily you need to create an equivalent emotional state, frequency, feeling to the trauma, either equivalent or higher than the trauma itself. So when I say I raise my voice and threaten you, knowing that it's in alignment with the pain in my body, that pain goes, you're finally listening. Yes, this is what I've been doing for you. And I'm making this up as if it's like, and it's my way of explaining this.
Right.
It's like me looking at my grandson when I tell him he can't have a popsicle, and he goes into a cry, rant, I don't like you mode. And I simply say to him, I see you're upset. I recognize that frequency in him of wanting something he can't have. And I do not punish him for that. And I don't say, you need to go to your room or you need to do this. He doesn't need to do anything except feel his longing for the popsicle, and knowing, because I'm in the room, that he cannot have it. And I still love him. It's not, he doesn't get punished for being disappointed. I get disappointed all the time, and I'm either punishing myself, or used to punish myself for just feeling disappointed. Now, if I feel disappointed about anything, anytime, I recognize it. I validate it. I'm feeling disappointed. It's even worked with when I felt depressed. Instead of going, oh shit, I'm depressed, so I gotta do something, I gotta call a doctor, no, I'm depressed. I'm feeling depressed. Well, if I think about what's going on in my life, there's a something that's triggering that. Lately, it's just been my getting used to getting old. It's something. So if I just say I'm depressed, it validates that feeling in me, and is recognizing I'm not punishing myself. I'm seeing, I'm validating, I'm an enlightened witness to myself, just as I am an enlightened witness to my grandson's feelings of disappointment, of frustration, of whatever the feeling is, and simply saying, I see that, and this is what we're going to do.
One of the things that one of the tools that you taught us for accomplishing that validation of an unhappy feeling or a just uncomfortable feeling. And we use this in the Rusty Nail meetings. I actually use this in my talks at my church, is that great line is, I give myself permission to be depressed.
Yes.
I give myself permission to whatever it is. Fill in the blank. I love it when we did this once originally in the men's work. Somebody said, you know, I stopped at the store and bought a donut. I shouldn't be eating the donut. And you said, are you willing to give yourself permission to eat the donut?
Yeah.
And the energy in the room, it was like, first of all, everybody, my experience was everybody just kind of went like that, because it never occurred to any of us to accept ourselves just the way we are.
Right.
That the natural state was to have some level of war going on inside, and that's the addiction to excitement manifesting. I got to beat myself. I screwed up. I did that wrong. I got to do this. I shouldn't have done that. Oh, look, what a terrible person, you know, on and on and on. Generating that excitement. And that's what we do in relationship. We also let our partner now in on the stimulus.
Yes.
Oh, she did this, and she's always doing this. I can't believe you didn't balance the checkbook. You lost the keys, whatever. And now now I bring it into my internal civil war, and I up the ante of the excitement, the adrenaline, the whatever it is that's going on literally physiologically in my body to support this defense mechanism that's still alive and well and kicking and doing its thing.
And it recreates that chaos and the tension out of it's a benevolent energy. It's looking out for your well-being,
right?
Albeit misinformed. It doesn't know that. Our subconscious,
and it can't know that because it's an emotion.
And it's subjective. Emotions are subjective. They're not personal. I don't know if that's wholly true, but it's close enough for now.
The subject of the emotional body.
Yes.
And the emotional body cannot be argued with because it doesn't have the mechanism to do anything but feel.
Right. It's subjective. It just simply accepts what happened.
Right.
And then I create a story around it, and it attaches to that story, which is the story I live my life by.
I suggest it's the other way around, John. I suggest that because the emotional body comes first, it trains the subsequent mental body on how to think and frame this.
Yes.
It's like my storyline, my script was actually written by my emotional body through the emergence of my mental body. That's partly why I'm used to having a feeling and energy, and then the thought comes up like without any intervening second.
Yes.
Bad feeling, reaction, scripted, compulsive reaction. So like what I shared this before, when I stub my toe, the immediate thing that comes out of my mouth is you clumsy fool.
Right.
So my emotion of there's something wrong with me because I'm not athletic like my father, the emotional body that was trying to defend itself from criticism now replicates the criticism because that's what it learned, and the emotion trained the thought.
Yes.
And that's why, like I said, it's difficult it's why you can't untrain this stuff through thought. You got to go the other way around. You got to go to the originator, which is the emotional body.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that I learned this week, I was working with a sponsee. I'm a sponsor of several people in the Adult Children of Alcoholics program. And we were talking about this, and all of a sudden, the first step I had a different reading of the first step. The first step says we became powerless over the effects of growing up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional family, and our lives have become unmanageable. And the thought jumped into my mind, the implication of the first step is I'm powerless, so quit trying. Quit trying to change this emotional body. The emotional defense mechanism cannot be changed by any power that I possess.
Right.
And that's why in the 12-step program, we turn this over to a higher power that does have the power to do the healing. And then the higher power will work through me. So the higher power is not some disembodied essence way up there on Mount Sinai. The higher power is in me, working with me.
Yeah.
Because the higher power is also subjective in the sense that you were saying it earlier. The higher power gives me whatever I want. If I want pain, the higher power says, okay.
Yep.
Just like if I want healing, the higher power says, okay, in the same way.
Yeah.
So in that way, our higher power is our servant because we have been given choice.
Yep.
That's the distinction of human race over all the other species on the planet. We can choose what our next experience is going to be.
Yeah.
And that's something that is, for most of us, we never get there. We never get to choice. We're living in compulsion.
And part of the accountability process is the accountability, my truth, feel the emotion happens on either side of that is choice and power. And then I intend. And in that nurturing place, in that accepting place, accepting that I'm mean, based on my childhood experience, based on where I find myself in the moment, allows me to have choice. What I was doing before and thinking I was making a choice was the knee-jerk reaction to the filter that said, do this and stay safe. And I thought it was a choice. I thought, well, I knew what was wrong. I knew it was bad, and I did it anyway. Well, I didn't really have a choice because this mechanism is directing my behavior, especially when it comes to life or death situations or trauma, to keep me out of the trauma, and choice doesn't even enter into it. And this is a very difficult thing to convey to people. When I first started working in the institutions in jail, they said, no, I made the choice. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And they've been in jail. This one guy was 20 times in 50 years. And so, and they make that make sense to themselves. And it adds to the judgment of, I'm stupid, there's something wrong with me. Or look at me, I'm a rebel and I don't care. Either way, I'm sitting in jail and not really making a choice, because being a rebel or making a choice and I know that it's wrong isn't who I am. It isn't my authentic self.
Let's talk a little bit about, share with us, if you would, how to be with the fact I'm in a relationship, I'm learning about accountability and I'm working on this stuff and my partner doesn't want any part of it. And my partner doesn't want it, doesn't learn this process. So I'm being accountable and I'm being vulnerable, and my partner is still filtering this through his or her child of or family of origin particular activating system filter. What are your thoughts about how do we handle that?
Number one, it's difficult and at least impossible at worst.
Well, at least you're telling the truth.
Yeah, and it was something that came up a lot in the violence intervention class, that if I do this, she needs to. No. Okay. Now, if I do this and she would, that would help. Okay. And I would talk to the people I was talking to, I'm giving you this information for you. Leave her alone. This is for you. This is your choice, and it's determined on what you want. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Do you want her to like my idea was that I went to violence intervention program to learn how to be nice so that she would do what I asked. So when I just figured I was asking in the wrong way, and I learned how to ask, she would then, fall in line.
I'm tempted to say, how did that work for you?
Yeah, it didn't. So I wanted peace. So I was willing to do it all by myself. And and I was in several relationships through that period of time. They had no obligation to do it. I wanted them to do it. It pissed me off that they didn't do it. I had feelings about their not doing it. And I chose to do it myself. And what I've discovered is if one person in the relationship changes the game changes. There's no longer a contract to act like we did. If I'm setting healthy boundaries or saying to my partner, it is my intention not to raise my voice. I am not participating in what I see as verbal violence, and that's me raising my voice. And then she's left with, what does she do with that? Well, I've just told her what I'm willing and what not willing to do, which is what a healthy boundary is. So that changes the dynamics of the relationship. And you want to say for good or for bad, well, it changes it so that you can make a choice. And in my relationships, in this last long-term relationship, I came to the end of my accountability rope. I could not think of anything else to be accountable for. And when I got there, I simply said to her, would you be willing not to do whatever it is I had an issue with? Because it seemed to me to be reasonable. And actually the request, I'll spell it out because it makes sense to me. I may be wrong, it's not about being right. But I said, would you be willing not to demean or diminish me in public? And she said, no. That was clear. That was ultra clear. So I was, okay, what do I want? I want peace. So let's negotiate ending the relationship, because that's not working for me.
One of the things that you taught me, and you haven't said this yet, so I'm going to raise it, is as I was struggling with a relationship with a good friend of mine, you said, or I heard you say,
yeah,
are you willing to lose the friendship?
Yes.
And that was so powerful, John. And I suspect you went through something similar, where when we're learning to do this for ourselves and we're not requiring our partner, our loved one, our friend to do anything about it.
Right.
That implies, to my understanding, that I'm willing to not have this relationship.
Yes.
It's very similar to we've talked about this as a general principle in this work, which is I'm willing to ask for what I want with no expectation of getting it.
Yes.
There's a certain power in removing attachment to the outcome.
Yes.
And allowing the universe or the higher power or God or however we want to express that to manage the outcome.
Yeah.
Manage the manifestation rather than me, because I'm not as big as my higher power. So whatever I can come up with will never be as great as what my higher power can come up with.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard one for many of us. It wasn't hard for me because I've been doing this work for a long time, but in the beginning, it would have been very hard had you said to me, are you willing to lose that relationship? Are you willing to lose your wife? Are you willing to lose your husband? Because the attachment to the outcomes that we desire to be created through our power is still pretty strong. And I really have to be willing to let all of that go to find that peace or happiness or whatever it is that I really say I want.
And it speaks to having the trauma is a 5-year-old is not willing to lose their parent.
Right.
So they will do whatever they need to do to maintain their connection to their parent, because that's their life. They would be lost. They would be
They would
gone.
die.
They would die. They don't know they would die. They just
Right.
have this terror that's inside
Feel
them.
like they would.
Yes, and so, and it's in the attachment disorder. In fact, one of the traits from the Adult Children of Alcoholics 12-step group is fear of abandonment, willing to do almost anything to hold on to a relationship that I feel abandoned in. And that's paraphrasing it. So I had worked on my attachment, I want to say disorder, but my attachment issues, and I was willing to be alone. Most of the relationships I was in before that, I would do everything so that she would say, yes, I'll stay in the relationship, which meant me not being who I was, or compromising myself, or not saying what I wanted to say, or asking for what I really wanted for the fear of losing her. And again, that fear, that attachment was subconscious, and it didn't make any sense that a grown man of 30, 35 years old would be afraid of losing that, whatever was the woman was, or the person was that was in a relationship with me. And that fear of abandonment was so intense that I gave myself up. When I talk about coming to the end of my accountability rope, accountability introduces me, to my, I start the process of becoming autonomous. I start the process of realizing who I am and my gifts, of becoming authentic and living the life that is authentically me. And the good news there, good news and bad news, is I don't need you to feel good about myself. I don't see any bad news in that at all right now. This is what I'm willing to do to support our relationship. I used to do things for the other person, expecting some kind of reciprocity. Now I do it for the relationship, because the relationship is important to me, and me building a healthy relationship, she doesn't owe me anything for that. And we'll go back to something simple. If we go out to dinner, she wants Chinese, I want Mexican, and she wants Chinese a bit more than I want Mexican, I'm willing to have Chinese. I'm willing to cooperate. I'm willing to do it. If she wants to see this movie and I want to see it, I'm willing to cooperate. I'm not willing to compromise myself. And I will cooperate, because my interest is in building the relationship, building the foundation for me, for my security, my safety, my place of comfort, my place of safety. She absolutely benefits from that, and she doesn't owe me anything for it. It's like my grandson doesn't owe me anything for being a loving grandfather. There's no we're not keeping score here.
You don't send him an invoice?
Huh?
You don't send him an invoice?
Yeah, I don't send him an invoice. And it's my choice to be the grandfather. He gets to be the recipient of that, and I'm doing it for myself, and I know that it benefits him.
Well, let's follow that up a little bit, and talk about the question of, can somebody else make me happy?
No. No. They have an influence over me. They influence me, absolutely. It is my choice to be happy. I'm in the last, again, long-term relationship I was in. At the beginning of the relationship, I made the statement, I want you to know that I know you're not responsible for my happiness, which also means I'm not responsible for your happiness. And she took issue with that.
But I think this is an important point to explore, because it's a myth, a great myth in our culture, and it might be true in all cultures, I don't know, that the other person can make me happy, sad, angry, whatever, that somehow this person, and I think this must go back again to the parental relationship.
Yeah.
That somehow we as little kids in this powerless emotional bind, found our happiness and sadness and safety entirely dependent on what we saw this other person manifesting.
Yes.
And so we lost our own sense of our own power because this higher power of the parent was continuously doing violence to our feeling state by imposing his or her feeling state.
Yes. In our childhood, in our infancy, up until 7 years old, we're in a soaking up mode, a theta state, where we simply take in energy. We take in, and our parent, they mirror for us what life is. And okay, from in that age, we are truly codependent. That's the definition of codependence. It's a actual, I am, as a 3-year-old, I am absolutely dependent on my parents, my guardians. So that's the only time in our life where that is true. Once we become rational, or we get a sense of self, that becomes our job. That becomes and having the foundation of infancy, toddler, of being loved and nurtured and seen for who you are, us giving ourselves, acquiring this for ourselves is natural, and we just do it. Without that foundation of receiving that nurturing and love, we don't know how to nurture ourselves. So it's obvious that it's not me, it's them. So we carry that childhood belief or condition. It wasn't even a belief. The reality is they're codependent into our adult life. We don't separate from our child. So we're still in a childlike state. As for me, a 250-pound, 45-year-old man, I'm still thinking, you just made me mad, when no, I saw what you did. I couldn't reach my feelings, and I'm scared, or I'm in a fear of abandonment, or I'm fear of criticism. You just criticized me, and I don't know how to take that. So you made me. And we always choose our state. I remember one time coming home thinking about this, and it was a sequence of events. And I went home one time after a meeting, a violence intervention meeting, and my partner said something, and I got angry. I was angry. And then I remember coming home and my partner saying the same thing, and I chose humor. And I got it at that moment. She had nothing to do with my choice. She had nothing to do with my choice. It was like an embodiment of this concept. I choose my feelings. They do what they do. And don't get me wrong, other people impact me. I impact other people. That is absolutely true. What I do with their impact on me is a choice. I can choose peace, quiet, serenity, or I could choose irritated, agitated, otherwise annoyed. My goal is to have that choice in alignment with what's happening in the moment. So if I go home and somebody's screaming and yell at me, and I'm sitting there with a silly grin on my face, I'm thinking that's not in alignment with what's going on. So, you know what I mean? That's out of alignment with what's going on. So my goal is to match my response in alignment with current reality, what's really going on. So if something happens that creates joy and openness, I want to experience the joy and openness that's available to me. If something's going on that's tragic, I want to be in alignment with that. I want to be with people who are going through the same thing, so I can relate and communicate, and maybe a loss, or somebody died, or and I, just back to the basic thing, I choose that. I choose that based on what I want, and knowing that other people impact me, and I can choose to go sideways, to dissociate, to participate, and which manner and what intensity to participate in. That's my choice.
We're running out of time here, so I made a note to myself to pick this up next week. I'd like to, for the newcomer again, to explore more carefully what it is, what we mean when we say we have choice.
Yes.
Because I want to help people get a distinction between choice and compulsion.
Yes.
And subconscious choice versus conscious choice. So I thought maybe one of the ways we could get at this next week is to take a look at the principles, the rusty nail principles, the accountability principles. And the first one is we're always getting what we want. And we talked about that at the top of this hour. So maybe that's a place we can help unpack this notion of choice.
Yes.
Because because I'm listening to you talk, and I'm using my beginner mind, and I'm going, I didn't have a choice.
Right.
When she said that and I got pissed off, I just got pissed off.
Right.
So you're using choice in a very specific and understandable kind of way that may not be intuitive to someone who's looking at this or listening to this for the first time.
Yeah. You know, I'm grateful that you decided to do this with me, because unpacking this can be tedious sometimes. My experience where I'm at, having done this for so long, is I use the words that I didn't even understand were existed, that you could put them together the way I'm putting them together with the picture I have behind them. So this is good that we clarify and bounce off of each other.
Yeah, and I think once you start your group up, and you have new people in, you're going to remember this much more intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
As people go, what are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember. Okay. I'll close this. I'll just tell you a story. I remember when I was in the government, and I always had a job in government where I interfaced with the public, and I was always acutely sensitive to whenever we would have fellow government people speak, that they would just normally use government jargon.
Yeah,
that's how in government we talk to each other. We have all the initials and the shorthand and all that kind of stuff. So people would throw these things out to the public, and I go, well, wait a minute. Would you explain to people what you mean by the ABC?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, so it just became a sort of second nature to me to be able to take the position of the other in those kinds of environments, because my intention was that people would have clarity to the extent that there's whatever I can do to help people get clarity. Obviously, I can't make them hear what they hear.
Right.
But I can at least, this goes to the way you often characterize this work, demystifying behavior.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Really cool.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, John. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And I look forward to picking this up next week on choice, compulsion. We're always getting what we want. What the heck does that mean?
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Marty.